The Apartheid of South Africa by Ryan Fetterbush
and Jake Later.
National
History
Day
Project. Hi, my name is Jake Later, and this is 60 Minutes. Tonight, we will take a look back at the apartheid in South Africa. Tonight, we are going to talk to some historians about their views on the apartheid of South Africa. First, we're going to talk to Mr. Fetterbush. Mr. Fetterbush, can you give us a historical background on the apartheid?
Apartheid was a system of legalized racial segregation enforced by the National Party of South African government between 1948 and 1994. Its roots were in South Africa's early policies of separation. It was dismantled in a series of negotiations from 1990 to 1993, culminating in elections in 1994, the first in South Africa with universal suffrage.
The population was 19 million blacks and 4.5 million whites. The land allocation was about 13% to the blacks and 87% to the whites, which just shows how much power the whites abused, although they had such a small bit of the population. The ratio of average earnings was 1 to 14 in favor of the whites. The doctors per white population was one in every 4,400, but the blacks was 1 in every 44,000. The teacher-to-pupil rate in the education system was 1 to 60 for the blacks and 1 to 20 for the whites. These statistics just show how big of a disparity there was between the rights of the blacks and the whites.
The apartheid legislation classified South Africa's inhabitants and visitors into racial groups which are black, white, colored, and Indian, and then separated people using this arbitrary and unscientific classification, allocating grossly unequal civil rights. Blacks are stripped of their citizenship, legally becoming citizens of one of 10 theoretical sovereign homelands. The government created the homelands out of the territory of black reservations founded during the British Empire period. These reserves were akin to the U.S. Indian Reservation, Canadian First Nations reserves, of Australian Aboriginal reserves. The apartheid had many organizations that were involved in it, such as the Bantu Education Department. This was a governmental department created by the Bantu Education Act for the education of blacks in South Africa by the National Party government during the apartheid years. Another organization was the Civil Cooperation Bureau, or the CCB. It was a covert special forces organization in the apartheid era whose objectives were to eliminate anti-apartheid activists throughout the world, to destroy ANC facilities both inside and outside South Africa, and to circumvent United Nations, imposed sanctions such as the UNSCR 418 of 1977 mandatory arms embargo against South Africa. Finally, the National Party was the governing party of South Africa from June 4, 1948 until May 9, 1994, and was disbanded in 2005. Its policies included apartheid, the establishment of a republic.
The stated aim of the International Freedom Foundation, established in Washington, D.C., in 1986 was to promote individual and collective freedoms worldwide, freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of association, free enterprise, and free market principle. This was believed to be funded by South Africa in hopes to end the apartheid. The Progressive Federal Party was a South African political party formed in 1977. It advocated power sharing in South Africa through a federal constitution in place of the apartheid. The end of the apartheid started in 1989 when F.W. de Klerk became the president of South Africa. An attorney like Nelson Mandela, de Klerk realized that South Africa had to change. In 1990, de Klerk and Mandela reached an agreement. White minority rule would end without bloodshed. South Africa would hold its first all-race elections. The parliament created by these elections would then have 5 years to write a new constitution for South Africa. The ANC gained control of the national parliament with 63% of the vote. The parliament then chose Nelson Mandela as the new president of South Africa. De Klerk's National Party won 20% of the vote, assuring him one of the deputy president positions. At his presidential inaugurations on May 10, 1994, Nelson Mandela, who was 75 at the time, pleaded for unity among the racial groups that had been so bitterly divided during the decades of apartheid. Mandela's election as president marked the end of the apartheid of South Africa.
Thank you for tuning in on 60 Minutes tonight. I'm Ryan Fetterbush.
And I'm Jake Later. Thank you for tuning in to our special documentary episode on the apartheid of South Africa.
We want to get a shout out to Macharia Uwat on his great efforts this
This Olympic qualifiers
yes.
in October and November.
Yeah.
Mr. Cafiero, you can, fix us with that answer. And he tried really hard, and he was a lost boy.